Business Insight, Squirrels, Boats, and Thoroughbreds. That's rather unusual name for a new book by a local entrepreneur, Jamie Girdson. It focuses on leadership and innovation for today's small traditional business. Now, Girdson is president of a traditional Cincinnati business. You probably have heard of Apollo Heating and Cooling and Plumbing. In his book, he presents a roadmap for traditional businesses to follow. He says the key is separating sound thinking from conventional thinking. One leads to success, the other merely maintains the status quo. Jamie Girdson is with Business Courier publisher Jamie Smith in the studio. Jamie and Jamie.
Thanks, Brian. Jamie, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Brian mentioned 2 or 3 times in that intro, traditional business. Talk to me a little bit, what does he mean, or what do you mean by traditional business?
So when we look at the space that we're in, we look at the markets in general. There's startup space, which are businesses that literally get capital, have an idea, and start. There are Fortune 500 businesses. I think of traditional businesses in that space of sort of the 96% of the world that has, or at least in the U.S., that is $1 million in revenue or less. Okay. But more importantly, typically 100 employees or less. That are doing traditional things like heating, cooling, plumbing, you know, dry cleaning, sort of the basics or the service industry in general.
Okay. Well, when you talk about leadership in the book, do you feel like small and medium-sized businesses get the credit for good leaders, or do you think they're often overlooked?
You know, I think there is a lot of focus today on the startup, sort of the really sexy startup businesses, the different kind of technologies that are coming out. There is a lot of leadership thought around the Fortune 500, but it's this middle, you know, the middle place where we live, and we actually, the traditional business creates jobs. They create sustainability in markets. 96% they would say are $1 million or less, and that's 96% of all businesses in the U.S. So really, I don't think a lot of people think about thought leadership in those businesses, but I think if you look around, a lot of the thought leaders are actually are there.
Yeah. We also talk a lot about being a visionary and just vision in general. Right. Why is it so important to have a vision of the future and not just be caught up in business today?
Well, it might sound cliche, but if you don't have a map and you don't know the destination, how are you going to get there? We talk a lot about, in my organization, about a painted picture, about literally taking a piece of cardboard, you know, white paper board, and just putting pictures of things that you kind of create a vision or a future, and sharing that with your employees or your family or your significant other to really get an idea about what direction do I want to go, how do I visualize that, and then what happens is you subconsciously start to make decisions around that vision.
Okay, great. Squirrels, boats, and thoroughbreds. Yeah. You gotta give us some insight.
Okay. So not everybody's going to appreciate this, okay? So, but I'm gonna go for it. So let's talk about squirrels for a minute. So every business, right, has squirrels and dogs. And a lot of people will not necessarily, again, like this, but dogs will never climb a tree. And unfortunately, we have people in organizations that are dogs, and we have people that are squirrels. So we tend to want to try to focus on the squirrels and put more energy into the squirrels, because the last I checked, I tried to train a 13-year-old lab to climb a tree for a long time, and he never got up the tree. The second thing is boats. So that came back from my rowing career when I rowed competitively for a long time. And what I found is the fastest boats were what I call the quietest. And they were the easiest to win in because we were all focused on similar things. And thoroughbreds, right? So if we look at organizations or sports teams might be the easiest for this example. Sports teams in general, if they have all top tier talent, are not necessarily the greatest performers. So yes, you need thoroughbreds, but at the same time, you also need sort of Indians, not all chiefs.
Makes perfect sense.
Yep.
When I read the book this summer, I was fortunate enough to meet you last year during Leadership Cincinnati. Yep. You gave me a copy of the book. One of the things that I really took away were basically the takeaways at the end of each chapter. Yeah. I mean, it was like an action plan for what you just read. I really appreciated that. Tell me a little bit about that.
So one of the challenges always is we get great ideas, right? And if you don't ink it, it never happens, right? So you literally have to write down those ideas as you go. And one of the things I noticed in this chapter was I wanted to make sure the reader could stop and just stop at any point in the book and actually go execute the idea instead of just thinking about it.
Well, it worked because I did it. Well, where can we find out more about the book? Where can our viewers find it?
You can go to jamiegirdson.com. Or you can go to fishermansfoundation.org.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Well, I enjoyed reading it. I'm sure our viewers will as well, and I look forward to seeing more out of you.
Great. Thanks so much, Jamie.
Thanks for being here today.
Yep. Cheers. Thanks.